Hardcore, water and tea. Very, very
good. Well, I'll hit the button and let's see what happens, Mark.
cool.
Great. Okay. So here we are. Nice to have you on board, Mark. Thanks for joining me for what is actually our inaugural, imaginatively named Not Another Business Podcast. How you doing?
Awesome to be here. Yeah, what a way to start things off, eh?
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's right. I'm excited and looking forward to doing more interviews like this as time goes by. Good to see we've both got real backgrounds today, not virtual Zoom backgrounds. That's what we're telling everyone, isn't it?
That isn't a real telescope, obviously. Just there. We're just there. Can't be a weatherman.
Yeah. It looks like quite an old one.
Historic, leaving present from Sublime Science. So I guess maybe that's where we'll end up at the end of our chat.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Cool. So I don't know how many attendees we've got today, but I think we'll just jump in. One thing I wanted to briefly cover at the beginning of this, and we've got about an hour or so. I don't know if you realise, but we have stood on a stage together next to one another, would you believe?
Allegedly.
Okay, so I'll tell you when that was. That was, I think, in 2012 or 2013 at the Entrepreneurs Convention. Do you remember Creaser got people up on stage and you were one of them?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
You might have been it was pre-Dragons Den, I think that, wasn't it? Yeah. So, and I was stood, I think, on your right-hand side. I'm not really sure what the reason for us being up there, or I was just absolutely wetting myself in front of about 3,000 people, so I wasn't really concentrating on much.
Yeah, probably at the time. Yeah, probably at the time, 3,000. Yeah, a few thousand people would have been the most people I'd ever spoken to in one. I mean, it is quite a few, isn't it? So,
it is. I'm sure you've hit a higher number than that now, I would imagine.
Spoken to many humans.
Yes.
It's weird when you try and I'm being a kind of an actual. So the funny thing is, like, I obviously pretended to be a science guy on TV and the internet for 10, 12 years, but I actually am a real scientist as well. So a master's degree in physics. Thought I was actually going to be a scientist, wanted to be a scientist since I was approximately, let's say, 5 years old, when I kind of got some very misconstrued and odd understanding of what science was from reading George's Marvelous Medicine. But thought I was going to be a scientist aged about 5. Now actually sort of am a scientist. And then you end up just having that kind of mind that works out like how many people you've like communicated with, like digitally or through everything you've done. And it's more than like quite a few small countries at this point, which I feel bad for all these people. I can only apologize that I did not get more smart, more sooner in order to be more helpful along the way. But
there's plenty of time.
World.
I'm sure you're being modest, and I'm sure you've been, given a lot of great information away during those sorts. But also, there's plenty of time left, isn't there, to distribute
Let's hope. Let's hope so.
Value and information. Cool. So, look, we can't have a conversation at this point in 2020 without me asking the question: how are you finding lockdown? What have you been doing?
It's a bit of a weird one because obviously it's such a crazy situation, affects so many people so differently. So there's like obviously Sublime Science, the company I founded and I guess I'm mainly known for, is primarily an events company. So they make sweets, make slime, launch rockets, make science awesome for kids. Yes. Mainly in the real world at kids' parties, school visits, events, football stadiums, wherever that may be. So obviously they have rescheduled like hundreds, if not literally thousands of events at this point, which is not ideal, to say the least, from any perspective, both business or actually inspiring kids to know about science or whatever. And then on the other side, I've got a bunch of clients and people I help out with business that run e-commerce companies that are having quite literally the greatest month in the history of their company. So it's, and I helped out just as a consultant advisor, Sublime Science to relaunch the virtual, informational Make Science Awesome business. It's literally called Make Science Awesome.
Right.
Named by yours truly.
Yes,
and that could be, we'll see, because it's just launched yesterday and it's not closed yet, but it could literally be the biggest kind of info launch the company's ever done. So
right.
It's super varied, right? You've got kind of best ever to like worst ever cancelled 1,000 events, and that's in the same company, in the same group.
Yes, of course,
so
of course. That's
interesting is probably the best way to look at it, maybe.
Yeah. So really, lockdown, I mean, much as we've had some of our freedoms removed from us, time's been moving pretty quick for you.
Yeah, I'm also people don't often realize, so because I go on TV or whatever, I've gone on stage in front of a lot of people and stuff, I'm actually super introverted. So this is my home office I'm in now. I actually spend a lot of my working life in here anyway. So I think, yeah, it's probably less bad for introverts, I think is probably fair to say. I've got some super extroverted friends that are just going completely bonkers, not being able to go to events every day. And obviously more for me, at least, I do write, and also that, to be fair, as a scientist, embarrassingly, but I've really had my eyes open to how effectively you can communicate and lead groups and mentor and coach and advise, like through screens. So I definitely, it sounds almost ridiculous, 2020, but I had hugely underestimated how effective and good the technology is. And I feel a little bit silly for not almost, not being a bit more up to speed maybe a couple of years ago.
I don't know. I think we're all the same. I mean, there will be, I know people, I'd Zoomed with people and FaceTimed with people before all this, but it always felt a bit uncomfortable. But isn't that the thing about uncomfortable? As soon as you've done it a couple of times, it becomes normal.
Yeah.
And so this period, I think, will have, the share price of Zoom alone tells you how how this has become normal for us all.
Yeah.
So I don't think you're alone in that. I mean, I've got a load of questions here, but one thing you said there was you are naturally predisposed to being more introvert. So just picking up on that before we go into your story, how do you feel when you come off stage or when you're forced into a room of 1,000 people who maybe all want to speak to you? Does that leave you exhausted? Does it leave you exhilarated? How do you cope with the introvert versus the requirements on you?
Yeah, both, which is kind of funny. So primary school, I literally cried at primary school because my teacher asked me to read a book or had to stand up at the front. And I don't really remember, I think there was about 20 children in my class at primary. There wasn't that many. It was a pretty small little class in a village in Leicestershire, and the thought of doing that was so fear-inducing. I was literally weeping as a child. And now it's obviously TV. If anyone wants to be amused by how nervous I can be as a human, my Dragon's Den pictures is good for that. It's probably the most nervous I've ever been. First time on TV and first time ever pitching my business at the same time, which is fairly stupid to combine the two. It's like stupidity squared. Good thinking. But yeah, I really enjoy it. It's just that the definition, and I'm not like a super, I guess from your background, you might be more than me. I'm not a super kind of like personality expert or whatever, but I believe one of the easiest ways to kind of tell is like where you kind of recover. So like if you're extroverted, you'll recover by spending time around people. Whereas if you're introverted, so if I'm on stage or like interact with thousands of business owners, I'll then the next few days, I'll just probably be writing, I'll be reading, I'll just chill at home. We live in the countryside, literally in the middle of nowhere in the national forest. I'll just go and do that for a bit. And it's trying to find that kind of, I guess like everyone's doing with their business and life, right? Trying to find that balance where you can be super on. Love communicating with people, helping them, serving them, making their thing cool, really enjoy it. But on some other level, you've obviously got to look after yourself. Otherwise, it's a bit self-help, but you can't really help other people from a position of exhaustion. Like it's not, so you got to try and find that balance of, inspiring these million kids, but also looking after yourself. Because if you're not mentally and physically in the shape to do it, you're not going to be able to get too far.
Yeah. A good friend of mine who you might also know, Martin Norbury. Do you know Martin? Yeah. Martin talks about balance a lot. And I know he works with a lot of different organizations of all different sizes. But balance is always a challenge for all of us because we're trying to push and do things, but we need to have a chance to reset at the same time. Good. I could talk about that topic for the rest of the day, and we might come back to it. I doubt we'll run out of things to talk about. But tell us then a little bit about tell us as much as you like, actually, about your story, Mark, in terms of, how you got started, and then obviously into the Dragon's Den bit, because that's, it's all really interesting, but that's the sort of glitz and glamour around the whole thing, isn't it? Give us a bit of your story, if you would.
Well, it's funny you mentioned the time right now. So I actually started the business in 2008. So I kind of picked, I guess, the last worst time to start a business last time. So kind of Lehman Brothers had just gone bankrupt, done that whole thing. I was actually I'd moved out to Australia after doing my master's in physics. I'd moved to Australia, done a bit of science communication stuff already. With science communication, should probably mention, it's an industry that, because I'm in, I feel that everyone knows about, but no one really knows what that is. But that just means you explain how science works to non-scientists, to normal people, essentially.
Yes.
So I've been doing that for a while, driving around Australia in a pickup truck, teaching science to kids in places where they don't have science laboratories or much science equipment. Done some video stuff, done some, developed some programs, helped the business quite a lot. Done that for about a year, came back and was like, I'm going to, set up this business in the UK doing fun science stuff. Had it all planned out. And then kind of funny now, but, Lehman Brothers goes bankrupt, 2008, the whole world's fallen to bits. And I genuinely decided to go and actually have a meeting with all the banks, right? Just go to the banks, be like, hey, can I borrow a few quid, set this business up? And I'd never ran a business before, had no kind of experience of any kind. The only jobs I'd had were teaching people stuff. So I taught English as a foreign language, I taught robotics, I'd, just taught people stuff. And they were just like, obviously not, right? Obviously nobody wanted to lend me any money. They all thought my plan was fairly silly. And that was the end of that. So I got in touch with the Prince's Trust. They ended up lending me a whopping £1,750. That was the start of the company. I moved back in with my parents because, that was a pretty tight budget to.
Yes. How old were you then, Mark?
22.
Yeah, 22. Okay.
Yeah. And I literally had one bag of clothes, so I had to sort of get, car, laptop, phone, clothing, this is sort of a base level start. So got back, started working on all that stuff. And then bit by bit, the kids loved the thing, loved the experiments, making the slime, launching their rockets, exploding stuff. I mean, it sounds silly, but I essentially created and still create the awesome kind of experiments that I wish had been there when I was that kid.
Yes.
So it's not like selling to who I am now, it's just selling to the 8-year-old version of myself.
Yes.
And I think because of that, I've been pretty successful at hitting the mark, because I know what I would have liked, and then I just make that and see if they like it, and they generally do. So it's kind of like a not very sophisticated marketing plan. Worked pretty good,
but a pretty cute one, because you're tapping into the brain of a interested 5 to 10-year-old and showing them what you wanted to see. That's as good a place to start.
And I think marketing, if you strip away all the hype, which is kind of what I try and do to a little bit of an extent these days, to strip away all the hype from marketing, it's really about understanding the person you're selling to. Obviously, with a kind of a science show, you're selling to the parent that's buying it and the kid that wants it. So you've kind of got two customers. But if you're going to sell that thing to the kid, if you were that kid, then you have an incredibly strong understanding of what they wanted, which makes your marketing a whole lot easier. I mean, probably all the people that I've helped, but a lot of the successful that people have had has come from them helping customers where they really understand their customer, often because they've actually been their own customer.
Yes.
Because then it's just easy. But yeah, that went pretty good. Reached a few more people over 5 years approximately. Went from me and my box of stuff to a national team of about 50 presenters scattered all around the country by then, a little office, some cool products and services, bunch of fancy pants customers, and we were doing quite good. Decided to go on to Dragon's Den. Why not? I don't know why. Well, I do know why actually, but I don't know. Is that, I could say why? Is that good to say why? Who knows?
Yeah.
Oddly, the reason why, I'd been thinking about it, because people have been saying to me for years, you should go on Dragon's Den. This thing's a Dragon's Den thing. God, since doing it, going really well, probably 100 people have been like, yeah, see, told you. But I went on because I won. No, I think it's the company. I think that year the company won. Sublime Science won a Great British Entrepreneur Award. for the best service business. So I was down in London, and I can't remember why, but some kind of event schedule. I think it was right in the middle of March or something. We had loads of events going on. So I'd literally done a stage show. We'd been stretched to complete capacity. I'd left the stage show and driven directly from wherever, somewhere in England, on my own, straight to London, gone straight to this Fancy Pants event, just parked on the street outside, straight in. And I'm like, and I was actually early, like by some miracle, get through London in a few hours, park outside this thing, super fancy event. And I'm like on my own, you know, like tired from my day, just walk in, and there's this dude there, and his name's Shane, and he's the guy that pitched Hungry House on Dragon's Den. And I actually recognized him from watching that episode. So just asked him about it, got chatting to him in the bar, and he said something very similar to, what's the worst that can happen?
Yeah.
And I was like, well, I guess, you know, I look a bit silly, like people probably just think I'm not very cool or whatever, which I'm obviously not. That'll be fine. And then ultimately I was like, yeah, probably a bunch of people would end up like buying the product anyway, just because they'd be more aware of it. And they would just, you know, a few million people would see a product. It's a pretty cool product. Surely some of them would buy it.
Yeah.
So I was like, yeah, I guess people just think I'm not a business guy or whatever. And I was like, I guess that's fine then. So yeah, hilariously, based on that conversation, because he did not get investment, right? That aged so badly. They told him on Dragon's Den that nobody will buy takeout using a smartphone.
Oh gosh, brilliant.
Yeah. Aged well. And then he sold that ultimately to Just Eat. And yeah, they had literally a good few million customers, I think, at the point of sale.
Great. Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, so that was, they got onto Dragon's Den. The whole thing went even more super bonkers. And then ultimately, yeah, we won a Queen's Award Friends Prize, inspired 1 million kids to discover how awesome science can be, and sold that business to a small company called Hyphen Capital back in, right at the end of 2018.
Yeah, okay. So it's 18 months ago, something like that, really? Something like that?
Yeah, I left, I like finished my kind of handover right at the start of 2019.
Yeah, wow. And the Dragon's Den experience itself then, because on the, I've done like the tiniest, weeniest bit of TV ever. Okay. Yeah. I actually recorded a whole pilot for something once, but then it never aired. It must have been down to my presence on the screen, perhaps. But what I did learn from it was that it takes a long time to produce a really short amount of footage, or it can do, certainly. So in terms of that, then you turned up with this idea. Well, I'll present what I do. I might pick up some good customers because what I do obviously is good and people buy it. Hey, if I get some investment, let's see where that goes. But that maybe not your primary. But so you turn up there. Yeah. How did that day go? Was it quite stressful? Was it long? Was it as quick as it looked on the telly? How was that?
No. It's a super old stressful thing. Like I say, the idea of like doing your first television appearance and then discussing like your finances, your business plan, and doing your first ever pitch simultaneously is like inherently not a brilliant idea, I would say. So I'm always there's a lot of downside potential to that. But being a scientist, I just applied my general thinking of science to that preparation. So I downloaded one of those little speedy up video things you get in your browser, right? That lets you watch videos on like 4 or 5x speed, so the full chipmunk speed. Yeah. And I watched like, I don't know, hundreds, like literally hundreds of pictures on hyperspeed. And just tabulated, I am actually this much of a nerd, but just documented all of the most common questions asked across probably the past 5 seasons of the show.
Wow.
Put them into a spreadsheet of order of most asked and significance to how they affected the outcome. And then prepared pretty solid answers to all of those questions. And I was reasonably fortunate and or some judgment, but most of the questions I was asked, it was me firing smoke rings, convincing them to make slime and just going a bit nuts.
Yeah.
And then in terms of all the questions, I think pretty much all of them had been asked before. And the only ones that hadn't were really specific to either me or the business. So it was just people were asking, how does this work? Who are you? What do you do? And like, however nervous you are, you can always kind of tell someone, what's your name and, what do you do? Like it's, so I think it's the most boring kind of business advice ever, I guess, but it's a bit of a preparation thing,
Yeah, best business advice ever. Prepare. I mean, I wouldn't have thought necessarily of all that prep, but it makes sense. It's like preparing for an exam, isn't it? You always know the certain questions get repeated on a 3-year cycle, or you can spot a pattern in the way the questions are asked. I say this like it sounds like I've passed a load of exams. I really haven't. But, yeah, okay. So that, you know, that's I think that's a really cool approach to it.
Yeah. So my whole, I guess, thing is like I'm way more of a scientist than a business guy, and I thought this was a problem for a few years, really. So I was like, I'd done this master's degree in physics, like a hardcore science nerd, and I was like, I'm going to start this company, and I realized I kind of didn't, you know, like you don't actually know what to do, right? If you've got I mean, most people obviously won't have bothered to go and do a master's degree in physics, but you can imagine they don't really mention, there's not a module on how to start a company, how to do a VAT return, how to hire someone, how to do an office lease. Obviously, they don't mention any of that stuff because it's not relevant to the actual, you know, clearly my fault, not to do with the thing I signed up to do. So I thought this was like, I was actually for a few years not like, I was almost like, if I kind of wasted a bit of time doing this degree for 4 years, really enjoyed it, learned a ton, great experience, all that stuff. But I was like, I've just learned all this stuff that I'm now not doing. And then at some point I realized I was never going to do. So I was like, thought that might be a massive problem, but it's actually kind of been the thing that's worked best for me. Because rather than kind of falling down the general kind of like internet marketer hype train, the business coach magic secret, blah, 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 generally delve massively into applying like a first principles analysis to find what actually works.
Yes.
And then just doing that. And people kind of say, like, how do you have that confidence to do this, is a question I get asked quite a bit. But it's not really like even a confidence in me, it's just a confidence in the scientific method. So like I have extreme confidence in, like, you know, the approach used by, say, like Newton, Einstein.
Yeah.
Like if you can put a man on the moon with a method, I'm pretty sure it's sufficient for me to make a small national company. You know, like it's so insane to put a man on the moon with like the power of whatever it is, a billionth of an iPhone or something ridiculous.
Yeah.
You know, it's just like, in terms of difficulty, that's why one of the things, hopefully, I don't come across as too like fancy about the stuff I've been able to pull off in business. Because compared to, like, you know, there's people out there trying to build like fusion reactors and trying to make electric supersonic jets. Compared to that, running and growing a business is very easy. Compared to, like, simply because, like, you know, creating the theory of relativity, like I can't even imagine, you know, like if you left me to figure that out, you'd be waiting a good while, right?
Yeah, and that is bonkers. And you know, that I'd love to pick your brains on that sometime, because again, I'm interested in lots of different things, not least the theory of relativity. And I must have read and tried to understand it on a number of different occasions. It's quite complex stuff. So like you say, compared to building a business that can be successful, profitable, lifestyle, and then ultimately exitable, that can allow you to go on and do other things, I'm sure in comparison to that requires a lot less brain power. But the key takeaway from me from what you said is you're breaking it down into a set of logical sequences and testing as you go, and you know, learning from the mistakes that have been made and applying a similar philosophy to new ideas, structure, form, you know, and using those principles that you learn through your time in study. But the key difference is that you've recognized the principles can be applied. So many others would have just learnt it and gone, okay, well, I studied the science, I'm not going to do anything with it, I'm going to go off and be something else now. It's transferring that across, isn't it? So no, that's cool. So who were remind me the dragons that invested in you, if that's okay to ask?
Yeah, sure. Nick Jenkins, which is the chap that did Moonpig, I guess famously known for that, and Sarah Willingham, generally probably known for London Cocktail Club, possibly Craft Gin Club. Lots of businesses ending in the word club, actually. But
yes.
Yeah, they both invested in 2015.
Yeah. Cool. And they were, to my mind, I haven't watched Dragon's Den for a bit, but I was watching it the time when you were on, actually. I watched it that night, definitely. and I was telling everyone that would listen, I've stood next to this guy on stage.
Yeah, just watch this. Obviously, it's going to go through.
And I do remember thinking, actually, you know, Mark's nailed this, because not only has he done a great pitch and got investment, he's got, to my mind, the two best investors. They're the ones I would want to work with, because they seem down to earth, very approachable, friendly, but clearly super business bright, understand all that. So I thought you did well. I thought you did incredibly well, of course. But did they have an active involvement then in the business, or were they silent partners with you?
No, they did. That's the cool thing. So that's one of the reasons I wanted to get Nick and Sarah to invest, in that obviously every dragon's different, and there's different ways of doing things. But Nick and Sarah both were like personally involved, whereas often, depending on who invests and which season and whatever, but a lot of the dragons that have been on there for a long time, if they're doing, say, 10 investments a year, and they've done that for 10 years, obviously they sell some fail, but you can't you can't be an active investor in 100 companies. It's just not actually possible. So that's why one of the reasons I wanted to get Nick and Sarah involved was because I wanted an input from their, members of their team as well, but I actually wanted input from them specifically, which is actually something you don't always get with every dragon, because, it's not even a criticism; it's just a fact of life. Like, if they build essentially an investment portfolio company and put all their investments in it, that's fine. But to my mind personally, I didn't really want. Then it's like I'm going to then get my advice from the MBA guy they've got to run the investment department.
Yeah, of course.
And I'm pretty biased actually towards, if you want somebody to help you with something, it's best if they've literally personally done the thing themselves.
Yes.
And I think the second thing to try and look for is they have an ability to communicate. They know why what they did worked, and they've been able to successfully share that with other people.
Yes.
And I think those two both kind of fit those criteria that I was looking for the best. But you never know how to play out. I mean, it went really, really well. They exited with me, so we invested together. Still speak to Nick and Sarah now. It's really, really cool. So no complaints at all. But you just can never know, right? Would it?
No, I mean, it's you're taking a leap of faith to a certain extent, and I'm sure there's a lot of due diligence that goes on behind the shaking of hands in the dragon's den. But so you still got time to suss out if it is right or not. But at the end of the day, when you put the ink on the paper, you're taking a leap of faith that person. It's just like getting married, isn't it? You do all your research, and you're absolutely certain when you walk up the aisle that you've done the right thing. But you never quite know until you start living together. And I mean, I know the world's different these days, but you get my point in the analogy, I'm sure. And in that regard, it has worked out well. Was there a specific plan then to work towards an exit from the beginning? Was there a start with the end in mind approach, or did the exit kind of just happen? How did that sort of work? By exit, of course, I mean business sale. Yeah.
No, there wasn't. I think that that kind of Covey quote of start with the end in mind is broadly good, very good advice in life and in everything. But like I say, because I started the business with my £1,750 Prince Trust loan on my box of stuff. I never would have imagined, and the most common reaction I genuinely got was, "You'll be bankrupt by Christmas." And I started trading on October 1st. So like the degree of confidence in this going well was not high. Like, met with 8 different banks. I think all of them, like all of the, the high street banks that had branches that would have a meeting, and all of them were just like, it was almost as they were like, "You can't be serious. Like, this isn't a real thing. You obviously have no idea what you're doing. This is no one's going to lend someone with no track record any money. You should probably not do this." So given that was the baseline expectation, like even once we'd inspired, say, like 250,000 kids or whatever it was, something around there, I think, and then going on Dragon's Den, thought we could scale that out, massively expand it. And then I got this thing about the 1 million kids. And when we'd inspired 1 million kids, I was just like, well, because the expectation, I think sometimes it's actually quite good to start with a realistic, and realism is sometimes quite pessimistic, just a real brutal analysis of where you actually are, what your skill set was. So I was starting a business in the worst time, and I didn't have much of a skill set. So the success probability wasn't very good. I just figured that if I can, even at that point, even if I can make this work at all, That's a great start. And then I think you re-anchor that as you go. So I think the start with the end in mind is a good thing. It's just, if you're not careful, I fall into this trap a little bit myself. You can almost try and think 23 steps ahead, and then sometimes people don't actually do anything. No. Because they're trying to see like you're trying to almost see step 53, and it's like sometimes you just got to put your feet in front of you and walk forward.
And I guess visualizing yourself on the moon is a reasonably good thing to do if you want to get there, but it's nowhere near as important as working out where you can take off from and what equipment you might need to build in order to get a takeoff platform set up, and what science you need to get the right fuel mix, and what tests you need to do, and there'd be a million steps between. Maybe more than that with all the people involved. In fact, I'm sure 10 times more than that with all the people involved. Having the vision, that's the JFK bit, isn't it? Having the vision is important, and someone to inspire and create the big thinking. But actually, the most important step is usually the next one, isn't it? Or completing the one that you're on at the moment.
Yeah, I think that's right. It's there's an unfortunate trend around kind of, I guess this is my like very, very chilled fight against it, but there's a very unfortunate kind of trend in the small businessy startup scene where it's because I do think mindset and visualization are like extraordinarily important, and I've studied them a lot, specifically stoicism and specifically like dealing with pessimism and I think you want to make like a brutally honest objective assessment of reality and be completely okay with any reasonably likely negative consequences and then move forward. I think the hype train of like, it's almost like a hype train of like, if you just visualize it going well, then it will go well. That's not actually true. Like that, you don't put a man on the moon by just visualizing the rocket taking off. They did, like you say, thousands and millions of tests and studied the physics involved and got real high level expertise and developed an incredible team and probably worked extraordinarily hard to make that happen. So I think it's the two together, right? You at some point you have that big goal. For me, the kind of big goal, I guess, was the kind of million kid thing. When that came in, I thought, inspiring 1 million kids would kind of really be something. That's a big number. And I do think, I wrote that down and kind of told the team and put that publicly. It kind of freaked me out, which I think is can be a good sign, that you're kind of shooting up enough that it can be quite fearful or quite uncomfortable. But then actually, once everyone's on board with that and you've got all that stuff, then it's really about trying to figure out how to make that actually happen. And it's the, at the end of the day, it's my view, just on kind of the evidence of it, is that's generally a series of a lot of experiments. So you're here, you want to get here. I'm just like, we'll implement 100 things, and then you'll get that classic 80-20 thing. So 20 of them will be reasonably successful. The bottom 20% are going to completely flop. The middle kind of next 60% are going to not flop, but they're not sufficiently useful that you can really say you've done much. And then those 20% are going to actually be pretty substantial. But you can't get to the 20. There is no real way around it other than to implement the 100. And I think that's one of the ugly truths of trying to do anything. You have to be okay with being at least not successful most of the time.
Yes, that's another probably Einstein or who's the General Electric guy, I learned how to not invent the light bulb 10,000 times before I invented the light bulb. And if I'd given up on time 5,000, I'd never have got one.
I think that's Edison, no?
Edison, that's right, yeah.
There we are.
There you go. So I knew you would know.
Yeah, it'd be awkward, wouldn't it? I mean, don't put me on the spot.
So as I'm keen to ask a little bit then beyond Dragon's Den in terms of, because you've told us what that was like, the investors, obviously there was a plan for growth beyond that. So around the time of the business sale for you and your other shareholders, when that came around, was that a stressful time? Was it an exciting time? And the last bit of that is, how did it feel the day when the deal was done?
Selling a business is, I think it's under talked about in to kind of your audience is obviously small business owners primarily, right? And it's really under-mentioned. Like I'd had a few offers over the years. The company had a reasonable media profile. Like say 10 million people have been on the website, probably more. Say 20 million people have been on the website.
Wow.
Well, some of them are going to be interested in buying businesses, and some of them will just try and buy it. It's like laws of massive numbers. Like every now and again, someone will try. But then when you actually run a real deal process and try and structure a deal and figure it all out, there is a lot to that I think almost nobody in this space particularly talks about. It's obviously not suitable for most people, because if you're starting out, or if you're scaling up, or whatever. But I think the book that's most helpful is can't remember the author's name, but obviously easy to get on Amazon, is Built to Sell. And that guy makes a pretty strong case that you should just build, the classic, but you should build a business that is sellable, even if you want to keep it. Because the other kind of cheesy adage, but the founder, either in the future, in a long enough time horizon, you will either die or the business will fail. But one way or another, you will not. So it's a question of timing, isn't it? You cannot choose. It's impossible for me to have done that forever. It's either the company will fail or I will die. If you make no decision, they're your final outcomes.
They're the only two possible outcomes.
The only two possible outcomes if you do nothing. So then you have to try and make a decision that's hopefully a lot better than both of those outcomes.
Yes.
But it is really tricky. I thought it was a very involved process. I learned a huge amount through it. And I've actually helped a little bit just as a kind of advisor and consultant, but with the company that bought Sublime Science to buy another company. So I've helped out a little bit on the kind of the buy side and the sell side, and worked in a few different deals and stuff. And it's really fascinating. It's a really interesting area. I really enjoy it. I like it.
Yes.
But it's not it's not all that easy.
Not without its challenges. And so was there anything particular you think that they were looking for? Was it because you were a high profile business? Was it because of the systems you had in place? Was it it's probably all of these things. Was it the culture that you'd developed? Was it the market that you had? Was there like one or two key things that you think made you irresistible to them? And I mean you, the company, and probably you as well, to a certain extent, although they recognized they had to remove you at some point.
I was going to say, I only, so I sold the business and was only as a full-time consultant, I guess technically, but for 3 months. So I was not really part of the business that was sold. So maybe I was doing it all wrong. Who knows? Maybe
I don't think so. I think if you'd made yourself dispensable, but run a business that could survive very well without you, then you ticked all the boxes for the investors, for the purchasers, I'm sure. The figurehead piece. I don't know. Do they still trade off the Our Story Marc Wileman?
Yeah. That's a few friends have said that, but friends that have sold companies that I've met on the way. A good friend of mine said that you're always the founder. That is very true. So that's that is always true. But it's been really cool. You're exactly right on the systems and process side, though. It's one of the real. I think we're like Darwinistically wired. If you're an entrepreneur, you're probably not going to be a big systems and process person. It's a very rare balance where you get someone that's incredibly entrepreneurial, creative, and actually likes systems and process.
Yes.
I've managed to discipline and train my mind to like them a lot more than I did, but mainly just to recognize the value that systems and processes bring, and try and focus on it's not what it does, it's what it does for you. It's kind of how you sell anything. So like systems and processes, like I innately obviously don't care about systems and processes. They're not very fun. They're kind of pretty boring. But then what do they do for you? They allow you to scale something, far massively beyond yourself. And if you scale something hugely beyond yourself, like into the, say tens or hundreds of people, and you don't have systems and process, it normally goes horribly, horribly wrong, quite honestly. Yes. So I actually spent a couple of years getting pretty obsessed with systems and processes.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure. Did the and again, that's the lesson in itself. Did the Did the business as it ran at the time, Sublime Science, did it have, was it franchisees? Was it employees? Was it a combination? Was it self-employed? Was it, how was that structure broadly put together?
Yeah, it's a bit of a mix. So it's not a franchise business. So there's no franchisees involved. It's an organic kind of, I used to call it like just a real company. It's just but yeah, I guess, my definition as an actual first principles thing, like the definition of a company is just really like a collection. You've got a few things, right? You've got a collection of people, you've got a collection of products and services, and then you've got a collection of systems that both attract and convert customers and operationally deliver the thing the customers bought. And I think if you break the business down into those systems and build yourself a little composite model, that's what you've got. But Sublime Science and the other companies in the group do a bunch of freelancing, and they have a bunch of employees. So it's a hybrid model, really.
Yes. And another book I'm sure you're very familiar with and have read is The E-Myth. Yeah. And actually, Gerber talks hugely about, the McDonald's model, the ultimate turnkey model. And, I've never worked in a McDonald's, but I do recall someone once telling me the mop bucket has got to be at a certain temperature before you can mop the floor. And that's like, that makes sense if you want to run a 5-star health and safety environment. But it also makes sense if you've got a process for everything down to the detail of what temperature the mop bucket's got to be.
Yeah, well, it's it's an incredible book. The E-Myth I think they've really nailed that. It's just such a great like how to systemize a business book. Pretty short, pretty sweet, bish bash bosh.
Very readable, very listenable, I always think.
Yeah, I think it's probably one of my most like gifted or recommended books. And it's not, slight caveat, it's systems and process, isn't it? So it's not like you've got to really focus on, try and get people is to focus on what systems and process, what does it do for you? So if you equate that to these systems and process, they mean freedom. That means I can work from home. That means I can travel. That means I can 10x my company. Then that might be quite interesting. If you focus purely on, it's a bunch of stuff, it's a bunch of spreadsheets, Google Docs, Dropbox, Zapier, front end, back end, some developers. Well, no one really, with the best will in the world, you're going to struggle to get too excited about that, aren't you? But
if you described like that, which we both know is the premise of the book, no. You'd struggle to maybe get someone that hadn't read it excited. But I think if you tell someone who wants to start a business, read the E-Myth, and don't even tell them any of that stuff. It's how you would structure and organize a successful business. I know from personal experience, as I'm sure you do, it's the most interesting stuff you can be reading at that time because you want your business to be successful and be able to operate without you at the end of the day.
Maybe I'm just a bit stubborn, which is probably true, but I think I got really interested in that kind of stuff after expanding a business without doing that.
Yes.
So I think thing one is to just randomly grow your business in an unsystemized fashion. Realize for yourself, for no reason. I mean, also maybe don't do this, right? Maybe actually get someone to help you that will say, you want to 10x a company, you're going to need superior systems and processes. Otherwise, this will go horribly wrong. It's definitely 100% nearly always true. Of course it is. But maybe I'm in that camp of like, I sometimes need to experience things for myself. So just be like, I'll figure it out, just do this. And then you realize, oh man, this is, I'm literally like working like 100 hours a week now. This is way less this is kind of annoying. You do it for a couple of months and you're like, man, I'm tired all the time. Like, this is terrible.
That's it. So there must be another way of doing it. And that's where
at that point, the book is a lot more appealing, right?
Perfect. But it's a holiday read at that point, isn't it? You know what I mean? So, what I'm also interested in is, so that, the day the exit came, the day the exit happened, there's got to be a day where you went from being the business owner to not being the business owner anymore, and a financial transaction happening, presumably as well. How did that feel? Was it, were you ecstatic initially? How did that feel, and what did the next couple of months look like?
It's a really weird answer, but mainly just relieved, quite honestly. So you're working on this thing for quite a long time. A lot of people, I didn't know at all, but you realize how many people are involved in selling a business, like, you know, so you've got obviously on the sell side, I've got a couple of investors, investment director. You've also got accountants and lawyers. They've got a buyer. Obviously, they've got some due diligence people, some lawyers, some accountants. There's some debt people. They've got some due diligence people, some accountants, some lawyers. There's a finance team. You know, it is, you know, probably a good 20 people working on a transaction for probably more, all in all. I don't know. There's a bunch of people working on something for months. Like that's absolute minimum, you know, many months minimum. And then at some point, yeah, you get to that point where you just, it's very much not, I guess the people think like kind of like Gordon Gekko, you know, sell a business and you'll be in this super nice building. I was literally here. I was in my home office.
Yeah.
We'd all signed all the stuff, and you know, everyone's signed literally, I don't know how many, 200 pieces of paper each, and they've all been sent around, and all these people are doing stuff. And then at some point, you're like, you know, they read it to you actually these days. They actually read a thing, and it's that ye olde English stuff, right? Where they're just like, you know, henceforth, notwithstanding.
Yes.
Says all this stuff, and you're like, what's that mean? And they're like, I reckon that's done then.
That's done.
And then someone's like, yeah, the transaction's been completed. I'm like, I know what that one means. That makes sense. So
yeah, and it was relief at that point.
Just relief. And I know I chatted to Nick about this, who really helped, Nick Jenkins, because he sold Moonpig and that's in the public domain. It's like more than £100 million. And he said he celebrated by having a sandwich and a cup of tea and then just going to bed because he was really tired, and he'd been working on it for months, and he was just happy that that was done.
Yeah.
And, you know, people are like, you know, do you go out and, you know, party or whatever? And I'm just like, no. No,
I just went, I had a good sleep, but I slept well that night. Exactly.
Just take it easy. And then the work begins on, obviously, to best hand over the company to the team in a way that can really, to allow the company to expand and grow. And I took that, as I think most people should, I took that pretty seriously. Like, I wanted to put in a decent bit of effort to put the company in the best position possible to expand bigger and better, and, you know, and all that good stuff.
Yeah, perfect. I mean, especially as for you specifically, it was your, you know, it's your passion. It was your, you know, it's your baby, as it were. So you, of course, want to hand it off to someone that's going to, you know, it's going to be in its best tip-top condition to go on and grow further, because you'll always be the founder. Like your friend said, yeah, that's right. So no, that's cool. And like I think you're right. That's not necessarily the answer I would have expected, but it makes perfect sense. So what next for Mad Mark? What comes? what are you working on now? I mean, I know you've got the book, which is interesting. So what does the next I don't know, 6 months, 6 years? What's the future look like?
I don't know. It'd be fun to find out. So I've been helping Sublime Science out a bit, just because that's been cool. I've just been saying yes to cool stuff that some people have asked me to do sometimes, which I'm not sure if that's the best answer or not. I gave hilariously this whole talk to my darling girlfriend about, you know, I'd sold the company. This was like so I'd done the handover stuff. I think it was literally like day 2 of my retirement. I'd given her this pep talk about, you know, I'm just gonna take it easy, you know, relax, chill, read books, like be in my office, just chill for a bit. And, you know, don't worry. Do not worry. I'm not just going to commit to something. No worries. Literally 15 minutes later, her studio's just over there. I knocked on Alexia's door, and I'm like, so I'm doing a talk on the Royal Yacht Britannia, and she's like, when is it? I'm like, it's next week. We've got like the flights and hotel. You know, we've got flights and hotel. You know, they're buying them all. They'll do that for us, and we're off. And she's like, 15 minutes. Like, she's like,
a day would have been nice.
She's like, what did you do in between? I was like, well, I got a cup of tea, went back, looked at my email, clicked through, and I just thought, oh, that sounds cool.
Yeah.
All right. But yeah, so I've been helping a bunch of business owners in no niche at all. So business owners doing all kinds of stuff. I put the other day, I updated my stuff finally to helping awesome humans to do cool stuff.
Yes.
But often what people need a bit of help with, it seems, is how to sell the thing that they sell. I believe, just from the evidence really, that there's only 2 actual functions that are necessary in business. So you've got kind of the 80-20 of the 80-20 of the 80-20. You know, you've got that finite, you've got that bottom sliver, and you need to be able to sell and market awesome stuff. and then you need to be able to develop additional awesome stuff to sell and market. And if you do those two things, you're absolutely fine. I mean, the hype train is somewhat true. You can hire other people to do all the other things. You can hire people to sell and market stuff, and you can hire people to develop products and services for you, obviously. But I think those are the last two, and probably the most difficult two, because they, like how I sold Sublime Science, like could anyone else have walked out of a lift firing smoke rings, wearing a slime covered lab coat, invited them to take slime and done an off the cuff business pitch? You can't really go hire someone and say, you know, off you go, because there's no roadmap for that. There's no, I mean, who do you hire? Who do you go to? I don't know.
Yeah.
You know, that's not like hiring a bookkeeper, or it's not like hiring a web developer, or whatever, you know, a WordPress guy or whatever.
Of course.
And then, so that's the marketing side. And then from the developing stuff side, I think that nearly always, I think most great companies, when you look at them, they actually develop their own products and services. So you can buy a bunch of stuff off Alibaba and hock it on eBay, sure.
Yeah.
But long term, what have you really got there? You know, like you've just got a commoditized product that you hock on a platform. I think that's not really, certainly that's of no interest to me. Like, if you do what you've got to do, you know what I mean? If you need to do that to get through, you know, to hit month end, to pursue your dream, whatever, just fill your boots. Like, you know, this is not some kind of servant, man. Do whatever you've got to do.
Yeah.
You know, you've got to sometimes make those bleak decisions to get to where I want to be, to do what you really want to do.
Yeah.
But I think with Sublime Science, so that's what I like looking back over it all. I think those are the two things that matter most. And I help some people to do either of those things. And that's where the book comes in, because I wanted to make something that was hopefully really, really helpful, and also just completely free. So there is obviously literally, like, there is no barrier to anyone. You can, you know, you can't help everyone that gets in touch with you online or whatever. But if you put that idea into writing and just give it away, then obviously you can.
Yeah, you can get in touch with as many people as want to find the information, and I'm sure it's as appealing to a young person starting out, or a more mature person who wants to have a go at it for the first time. So no, I haven't had a chance to read it yet. I think it's only just been released, hasn't it?
Yeah.
So how can people get a copy of it if they want a copy? And what's it called, Mark?
Well, the website is brilliant. Let's see if the domain actually redirects today, but you should be able to go to notabusinessbook.com. If that fails for any reason, just go to my site, which is marcwileman.com. But cool. Notabusinessbook.com. And I guess the reason for titling it Not a Business Book is, well, I guess two things. So one, it's really the story of me going from my Princess Trust loan to Dragon's Den, from inspiring 1 million kids to selling a business, and I call it becoming the worst retiree of all time.
Yes.
That's an award. I'm claiming that one.
Yeah, 15 minutes is pretty poor, Mark.
And secondarily, it's kind of, I'd say it's like a hardcore science nerd's analysis of what actually works. And it's not, so it is, so it's 7 experiments that made the difference and how you can apply them to what you do. But I think the other thing that's interesting about what I've done is it's not, so the science can be quite complex, but how to use it's normally pretty simple. So it's kind of the same way as, like, you know, if you had to actually like build a microwave, that would be very difficult to figure out the radiation, all that stuff. To use a microwave, you just go ding, and your food gets hot. And it's kind of that with science. Like, I'm not an actual, like, I am a real scientist, but I certainly am not Newton or Einstein, who's really moved the needle forward for humanity with a new, you know, incredible thing. I'm just somebody that's observed what some of the greatest minds in the history of the world have put together, and hopefully put it together in a way that's simple, so that then people can actually use it. Because the trouble with some of the smartest people in the history of the world, what seems simple to them can still be, you know, simple to Einstein is still probably pretty complex, I would imagine.
Yeah, so you've created some principles and, you know, intertwined within a story of how you went from where you were to where you are, with some guiding principles. That's, you know, that sounds fantastic. And I love that idea about putting it into language that people will be able to interpret regardless of where they're starting from. That's why I always think that's why Professor Brian Cox is so popular and successful, because he uses analogy and you see him on the BBC documentaries, he's always drawing pictures in sand or using rocks to demonstrate something, and it makes a complex thing into an understandable thing by bringing it into the real world. So, okay, so not a business book, and Marc Wileman. It's Marc with a C, of course.
With a C, although I do own it with a K. So if you fancy spelling my name wrong, I should.
You can still be found.
If the gods of the internet hold up, you'll still end up in the right place. But let's let's not test that out.
And I, for one, am glad you called it not a business book, because we wouldn't be talking now without that, would we? Because my Facebook group, Not Another Business Group, I know you spoke with Adam Carr originally, you know, that coincidence or similarity has given us the opportunity to have a chat and hopefully inspire some more people, which is all great.
And I'm now getting a little bit of stick for the Elon Musk not a flamethrower reference, which I think subliminally probably, you know, like may well have been the reason. Like it's super hard to say, but like I imagine so. Like I thought the not a flamethrower, you know, fake flamethrower product launch he did on Twitter, I thought that was brilliant and really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
And obviously Elon's always going on about like a first principles analysis. Actually, a lot of the big guys are, which is a kind of a weird niche, but like if you look at how they run Tesla, you look at how they run SpaceX or Facebook or Amazon, probably three of the most aggressively evidence-based iterative tech companies on earth.
Wow.
Also companies that are all going to be, if not already going to be $1 trillion corporations, I would suggest. Obviously, certainly they've got past that 100 billion level many years ago. So certainly all multi-billion-dollar companies, but in the small business land, this is what actually annoys me. So like, that's what they're using for Tesla, SpaceX, Amazon, Facebook. In the small business world, what you're typically left with is essentially just mysticism. So instead of using like the most incredible scientific reasoning of the history of the world, they go with like, this guy stands in front of his Lamborghini, gets his iPhone out and is like, yo man, I think this is the right thing to do.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, if that were true, like how come when you listen to Buffett or Bezos or like, they're not doing that? Like,
no.
And I think some of it's difficulty. So maybe that's some of my work's hopefully going to come in and bringing some of that stuff that works and has led companies to go from startup to multi-billion, but trying to keep that super fast, simple and easy so that it can apply. You know, if you've only got just yourself or you've got a team of 3, you know, face all those companies, you know, they've got hardcore, incredible engineering talent that can do those things. But pulling that off in the small business sense, you want to use the same principle, which is definitely correct, but the actual implementation is a little bit different because you've got to keep stuff simple in small business. Otherwise, you can just drown in complexity.
Yes. No, I get that absolutely, and I'm sure anyone that is listening or reading, well, not everyone will get that, but if they start a business, they'll get that pretty quick. And that's a really important message, I think. So we're coming to the end of our time. I've really enjoyed the chat. I do have one couple of quick final questions for you, Marc. So what advice would you have for anyone starting a business? Maybe we just covered that in the last answer. What would be your simple advice for someone starting a business?
Consider carefully and honestly a reasonably likely negative scenario. So when everyone said to me, you know, you'll be bankrupt by Christmas, trading October 1st, like trading from a business from home with no overheads. I'm like, how am I going to go bankrupt in 2 months, like, or 3 months, like, you know, whatever. But anyway, that I actually thought about that, and those people actually did me a tremendous favor, I think, because I actually sat and thought about it for a while, and I just came all the way around to thinking, well, okay, you know, maybe I do try this out, and maybe I do go bankrupt by Christmas, and maybe people say, oh, that guy's an idiot, and I'm like, okay, I'm fine with that. Like that's not, it's outside of my control. That's opinions of others, which is never really within your control. So I just was like, okay, then I'm just going to do it anyway. And I think if you make that honest analysis and you are fine with the reasonably likely negatives, then it really frees you up to just get stuck in and just make stuff happen, and without being too, like, I think in England we're quite bad at this, getting too worried about failure or too worried about the judgment. Because, you know, if you look at I think the evidence is something like, if you look at billionaires in the US, maybe Fortune 1000 companies, CEOs of them, the number of them that have been personally bankrupt in their career is over a third. Wow. So like bankruptcy is actually correlated with extreme wealth.
Success, yeah.
So like, I'm not saying go bankrupt. I'm saying, I'm definitely a cap the downside, manage your risk, don't do things silly. But if you just look at the evidence, and I think sometimes I'd say just analyze that risk and be okay with the negative. And if you are, then move forward. And honestly, if you're not, maybe give it some thought, man. If you're, like if you really can't face the fact that you might launch a product and someone might say it sucks on Twitter, like,
don't do it.
Probably just give up now, because even if it works, you're still going to live in that mindset of stress forever. And like, no amount of money is really worth that.
Yeah. But if you can deal with the potential downside, crack on.
Yeah. And then it's probably a good indicator that it is a good fit for you.
Yeah. No, that's cool. And my last question is, I always ask the time machine question, Mark, which is quite neat given we've been talking about Einstein. Okay, so if you had a time machine and could go, I'm going to say, if you had a time machine and could go back in time, what age would you find yourself at, and what would you tell yourself?
Maybe it's a conversation, but I would definitely go back to, like, I can't remember her name, but my primary school teacher, aged approximately maybe about 7, a couple of years at primary. But that lady, she was really mean, telling me to stand up in front of 20 kids and like say whatever I was supposed to say. I'd probably just like read a book or something, I don't know.
Yeah.
But petrified, and probably just tell myself then, who was too afraid to talk to like 20 kids that I already knew. Like, I spoke to them every day. We were in class. Like, we didn't, where else do you go when you're 7, like, I don't know what I was thinking, but yeah, just tell that kid that at some point, tens of millions of people will have looked at stuff you've produced and created in the world. And then just watch that kid be super freaked out. I think I don't know if that would be very helpful to myself or not, but I think it'd be quite amusing. So I'd probably just do that.
Yeah, so it'd be like, you'd tell your 5-year-old self, 7-year-old self, hey, don't sweat this kid. All these, these 20 people in the room, and trust me, one day you're going to have 20 people looking at your mug, and you're going to be more than fine with that. So crack on.
Yeah, crack on, and it's always. I think you've definitely got to experience stuff for yourself in life, but I think if you can, it's the ultimate thing, I suppose. Because if you could literally learn from your future self, that would be
yes.
It would be I would definitely have made a lot less dumb errors, but if I hadn't made all the errors, would I
maybe you wouldn't be where you are. Exactly. Life's a beautifully complex thing, isn't it? And everyone ends up at the right place where they should be sooner or later.
One way or the other.
Yeah. No, look, really cool. I mean, I've thoroughly enjoyed chatting with you. An hour, it doesn't feel like an hour to me. I don't know what it felt like to everyone watching, and I don't know what it felt like for you, Mark, but it's been a real pleasure for me.
It was an absolute pleasure. It was great to to chat.
Any closing words from you before we sign off?
I was just going to say, grab yourself a copy. Not a business book, notabusinessbook.com or marcwileman.com. And check it out. My email and stuff is in there. So obviously let me know what you think. The feedback has oddly been incredibly amazingly good from quite a small number of people so far.
Yes.
Which is super, super cool. But maybe you'll hate it. So if you don't like it at all, you can let me know too.
You can live with it, even if that is the case.
I also, maybe we can close on that. I think feedback, both negative and positive, is super, super valuable. So if it's not for you, you hate it, still genuinely let me know. I appreciate the input. And if you like it and it's super beneficial to you, then definitely let me know, because that's obviously literally why I wrote it.
Yeah, of course. Hey, it's been really good fun, Mark. I've enjoyed getting to know you a little bit better and chatting with you. I'm sure we'll be in touch again soon. Maybe we'll be on a stage together again one of these days. Who knows?
Sometime, hopefully not too far in the future, eh?
No, exactly. Oh, look, take good care of yourself, mate, during lockdown. And I'll distribute this out via the channels, probably YouTube, and podcast it. When I got that, I'll share the links with you. And if I hear any feedback from anyone, I'll let you have it. But look after yourself, mate. And I'll see you again soon.
Cheers. Take it easy, Adam. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye now.